October 3rd, 1943, 23:47 hours. RAF. Halesworth, Eastern England. Colonel Marcus Webb sat alone in the operations room. The lamp on his desk cast long shadows across maps marked with red grease pencil. Each X represented an aircraft that never came home. Each circle, a formation that broke apart under German guns. The telegram had arrived 20 minutes ago. Webb read it for the third time, though he'd memorized every word after the first. From 8th Air Force Headquarters, 2, CO-56th Fighter Group. Effective November 3rd, 1943. All P-47 units transition to P-51B Mustang. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt program terminated. Acknowledge receipt. 30 days. He had 30 days to prove the impossible, or 600 men would lose their aircraft, their mission, their purpose, and thousands of bomber crews would continue dying in skies over Germany. Webb set the telegram down and pulled a folder from his desk drawer. Inside, monthly combat reports. The numbers told a story no amount of courage could rewrite. September 1943. 56 fighter group statistics. 41 combat sorties, 3 confirmed kills, 7 P-47s lost. Kill ratio, 0.43 to 1. For comparison, the Luftwaffe's Messerschmitt Bf-109 units averaged 2.8 to 1. The new P-51 Mustang, still in testing, had demonstrated 4.1 to 1 in limited trials. The P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't just losing, it was being humiliated. Webb stood and walked to the window. Outside, ground crews worked under floodlights, servicing the massive fighters that would fly at dawn. Each Republic P-47D Thunderbolt weighed 14,500 pounds, fully loaded, 7¼ tons of aluminum, steel, and ammunition. The heaviest single-engine fighter America had ever built. Too heavy, the critics said. Too slow to turn. Too cumbersome for dogfighting. A flying tank that couldn't dance with the nimble German fighters it was meant to destroy. Webb had heard every criticism. He'd made some of them himself back when he was a test engineer at Republic Aviation in 1941. Back when the first prototype, the XP-47B, rolled out of the factory weighing 12,000 pounds, 3,000 pounds over the design specification. Engineers had looked at the numbers and shaken their heads. Pilots had climbed into the cockpit and questioned whether this monster could even get airborne. But Webb had seen something else in those early tests, something the critics missed while they focused on what the P-47 couldn't do. He returned to his desk and opened another folder. Technical specifications, performance data, numbers that told a different story if you knew how to read them. Republic P-47D Thunderbolt. Power plant, Pratt & Whitney R2800, double wasp radial engine. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows. 2,000 horsepower at takeoff. The most powerful piston engine in any American fighter. Armament, 8 Browning M250 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing. 425 rounds per gun. Total ammunition capacity, 3,400 rounds. When all 8 guns fired simultaneously, the P-47 delivered 6,400 rounds per minute. Enough firepower to saw a German fighter in half. Maximum speed, 433 miles per hour at 30,000 feet. Not the fastest fighter in the sky, but respectable. Service ceiling, 43,000 feet. Higher than any German fighter could reach. And then there was the number that made Webb pause every time he read it. The number nobody seemed to understand mattered. Dive speed, 550 miles per hour plus. Structural integrity maintained beyond 650 miles per hour in testing. The P-47 couldn't outturn a Messerschmitt. It couldn't climb with a Focke-Wulf, but it could dive faster than anything the Luftwaffe had. And more importantly, it could survive speeds that would tear German fighters apart. The question was simple. Why were American pilots trying to fight the enemy's fight? Webb's mind drifted back 2 years. Republic Aviation, Long Island, 1941. He'd been senior test engineer on the P-47 program. His job was understanding the aircraft's limits, pushing them, documenting what worked and what didn't. He'd never intended to fly combat. Engineering was his contribution to the war effort, safe, controlled, scientific. Then, Tommy died. His son, 9 years old, leukemia, 6 months from diagnosis to death. Webb had spent those months at the airfield, testing prototypes, telling himself he was doing important work. War was coming. The country needed these aircraft. Tommy died on a Tuesday. Webb was on a test flight, pushing the P-47B to its dive limits. By the time he landed and got the message, his son had been gone for 3 hours. He never got to say goodbye. Webb's wife, Margaret, had looked at him at the funeral, her eyes empty. "You chose an airplane over our son." She was right. He had. Margaret passed away 6 months later. Heart attack, the doctors said. But Webb knew better. She died of a broken heart, the kind that comes from losing a child while your husband is in the sky, chasing numbers. He'd volunteered for combat duty the next week. Couldn't stay in that house. Couldn't work at that factory. Needed to be somewhere, anywhere else. The Army Air Force was happy to take an experienced P-47 engineer, even one without combat experience. They made him a colonel, gave him the 56th Fighter Group, told him to make the Thunderbolt work. And now, 2 years later, headquarters was taking it all away. 30 days. Webb closed the folder and checked his watch. Nearly midnight. He should sleep. But sleep wouldn't come tonight. Not with 30 days counting down, not with the telegram sitting on his desk like a death sentence. He stood, pulled on his coat, and walked out into the October night. The air was cold and damp, typical English autumn. Webb's breath fogged as he crossed the flight line toward the maintenance hangars. His footsteps echoed on the concrete hardstand. Inside Hangar 3, work continued under harsh electric lights. Master Sergeant Nathaniel Garland stood beside a P-47, directing 2 mechanics as they changed spark plugs on the massive R2800 engine. Garland was 42 years old for an enlisted man, but he'd been working on aircraft since before the war, fixed farm equipment in Iowa before that. When war came, he joined up, left his family, put his skills to use keeping fighters flying. His son, Billy, had joined too. 19 years old, waist gunner on a B-17, stationed with the 91st Bomb Group, 50 miles north. Garland looked up as Webb approached, wiped grease from his hands with a rag. "Colonel? Didn't expect to see you this late." "Couldn't sleep, Nate." Garland nodded. He understood insomnia. Every crew chief did. You sent aircraft into combat. You waited. You counted them home. The ones that didn't return haunted your nights. "Bad news?" Garland asked, reading Webb's expression. "Headquarters wants to replace the P-47. 30 days to change their minds." Garland was quiet for a moment. Then he set down his tools and walked around the aircraft, running his hand along the fuselage. "This isn't a bad aircraft, sir. People just don't understand her." "Tell me what you see, Nate." Garland considered the question. He'd maintained P-47s since the 56th Fighter Group received them in early 1943. He knew every system, every quirk, every strength and weakness. "She's heavy. That's what everyone complains about. 14,500 pounds combat loaded. Compare that to a Bf-109G at about 6,000 pounds, more than twice the weight." Webb nodded. "Go on." "But that weight comes from somewhere. Turbocharger system adds 560 pounds, lets us fly at 30,000 feet, higher than the Germans can intercept effectively. Armored cockpit, another 240 pounds. Stops 20mm cannon rounds. Self-sealing fuel tanks, 180 pounds. Prevents fires." Garland patted the thick wing. "Total protection, 980 pounds. She's a flying tank, sir, but tanks protect the crew inside. The Luftwaffe doesn't care about protection when they can turn inside our radius and shoot us down before we can respond." "True." Garland pulled out a technical manual, flipped to the performance charts. At 15,000 feet, a Bf-109G can complete a full 360-degree turn in 18 seconds. Our P-47 takes 24 seconds. He paused. That's the difference between living and dying, if you're trying to turn fight. Exactly. Physics doesn't negotiate. No, sir. But look at this. Garland flipped to another page. Dive performance data. Terminal velocity in a dive. P-47, 550 miles per hour. Confirmed. Structural integrity tested beyond 650. We've had pilots exceed 500 in combat dives, and the aircraft held together perfectly. His finger moved to another column. BF 109G, maximum dive speed, 490 miles per hour. Beyond that, the wings start to flutter. Control surfaces become ineffective. W190A can handle 520 before the control stick jams. Webb studied the numbers. He'd seen these charts before, had memorized them during his time as a test engineer. But seeing them now, with 30 days remaining, they took on new significance. So the P-47 can dive faster. What good does that do when German fighters attack from above and we're tied to bomber formations below? Garland smiled slightly. Sir, you're the engineer. What happens if we don't tie ourselves to the bombers? The question hung in the cold hangar air. Webb looked at the P-47 sitting silent and massive under the lights. 7 tons of aircraft that everyone said was wrong for the mission. Too heavy, too slow to turn, a mistake. But what if the mission itself was wrong? What if the tactics were the problem, not the aircraft? His mind began running calculations, energy states, altitude advantage, potential versus kinetic energy, the fundamental physics of air combat that most pilots never thought about. A fighter at 30,000 feet carried enormous potential energy. Height could be converted to speed in a dive. Speed could be converted to climb, or to distance, or to maneuverability. Energy could be managed, traded, exploited, but only if you stopped trying to fight the enemy's fight, only if you fought your own. Nate, what if we never dogfight? What if we never turn with them at all? Garland set down the manual. I'm listening. The P-47 has advantages: power, altitude, dive speed, structural strength, firepower. What if we build tactics around those strengths instead of trying to compensate for turning radius? You're talking about vertical fighting, boom and zoom. Webb nodded slowly. Exactly. We maintain altitude advantage, always above the enemy. When they attack the bombers, we dive through them at maximum speed. Fire once, keep diving. Use our speed to climb back to altitude. Never slow down, never turn. Never give them the turning fight they want. Sounds good in theory, sir, but theory and combat are different things. I know, that's why we need to test it. Prove it works. We have 30 days. Garland wiped his hands again, thinking. The boys won't like it. Pilots are trained to dogfight. Turning away feels like running. I'm not asking them to run. I'm asking them to kill efficiently. A noise from the hangar entrance made both men turn. Captain Everett Holbrook stood in the doorway, flight jacket over his shoulders, 29 years old, the best natural pilot in the 56th Fighter Group, 3 confirmed kills, 2 probables, a rising ace if he lived long enough. Tennessee accent, easy confidence, natural talent, the kind of pilot who made flying look effortless. Colonel, Sergeant, burning the midnight oil. Webb studied the younger man. Just discussing tactics, Captain. What brings you out this late? Holbrook walked into the hangar, hands in his pockets. Couldn't sleep either, thinking about tomorrow's training flight, and thinking about Clarkson, and Mitchell, and Davies. The names of pilots lost in September. Good men, friends. They died because they got slow in turning fights, Webb said quietly. Because they tried to outturn aircraft that can turn faster. Because they fought the wrong fight. Holbrook's jaw tightened. They died because they engaged the enemy. Because they fought. That's what fighter pilots do, sir. Fighter pilots kill the enemy and survive to fight again. Dead heroes don't win wars. Neither do cowards who run from a fight. The tension in the hangar thickened. Garland quietly stepped back, giving the officers space. Webb kept his voice level. I'm not suggesting cowardice. I'm suggesting intelligence. The P-47 has advantages, real, measurable advantages. We just need to use them. Turning away from an enemy fighter? That's not using advantages, that's retreating. It is if you turn away and stay away.
But what if you turn away only to gain speed? What if you use that speed to climb above them and attack again from a better position? What if you control when and where the fight happens instead of reacting to their moves? Holbrook shook his head. Sir, with respect, you're a test engineer. You understand numbers and performance charts. But combat isn't a chart. It's chaos, it's instinct, it's training and aggression and will. You can't calculate your way through a dogfight. Webb felt the old wound open, the accusation he'd heard before. You've never fought. You don't know. You're just an engineer who happens to wear a colonel's rank. It was true. Webb had never shot down an enemy aircraft, had never been in combat before taking command of the 56th Fighter Group. His expertise came from testing, from analysis, from understanding aircraft performance at a technical level that most pilots never considered. But he'd also watched dozens of young men die because they didn't understand the physics of what they were trying to do.
You're right, Eva. I'm not a combat pilot. I'm an engineer. But I know this aircraft better than anyone else in this group. I know what it can and cannot do. And I know that asking it to turn fight German fighters is asking it to fail. Then maybe we need different aircraft. We will. In 30 days, headquarters is replacing all P-47s with P-51s Mustangs. Holbrook's eyes widened. They're grounding the Thunderbolt. Terminating the program, unless we can prove it works. How? By changing how we fight. By using the P-47's actual strengths instead of trying to compensate for its weaknesses. By winning. Holbrook was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the sound of distant engines drifted across the airfield. Night patrol returning from coastal watch. Finally, he spoke.
What exactly are you proposing, sir?
Webb pulled out his notebook, began sketching. Quick diagrams, altitude profiles, attack angles. We maintain position above the bombers, say 8,000 feet higher, 30,000 feet, while they're at 22,000. When German fighters climb to attack the bombers, we dive on them from above. 45-degree angle, full throttle. We build speed in the dive. By the time we reach their altitude, we're doing 450, maybe 470 miles per hour. Too fast for them to evade. We fire one burst at close range, then keep diving past them. Use our excess speed to zoom climb back to altitude. Reset. Repeat. He looked up at Holbrook. We never slow down. We never turn with them. We never give them the fight they're trained for. And if they climb after us? They can't. Not at the speed we're carrying. By the time they could intercept, we're back at altitude with all our energy restored.
They have to slow down to climb. We don't.
Holbrook studied the sketches. His expression was skeptical but thoughtful. This is completely different from everything we've been taught. I know. The whole group would have to retrain, new tactics, new discipline. Pilots would have to fight every instinct to turn with an enemy on their tail. I know. And if it doesn't work? If we dive through and miss? If German fighters ignore us and hit the bombers anyway? Webb met his eyes. Then 60 B-17s get shot down instead of the 70 or 80 that die when we try to dogfight and lose. The current tactics aren't working ever. The kill ratios prove it. We need something different. Holbrook walked around the P-47 slowly. Webb could see him thinking, processing, evaluating. Finally, he spoke. September 28th, Bremen mission. I almost died. Webb waited. I engaged a Bf-109 that came at the bombers from above. I broke formation, climbed to intercept.
Got on his tail. But when I tried to follow him through a turn, the P-47 couldn't keep up. He reversed position and got on my tail in the time it takes to count to 6. Thompson saved me by diving on the German and forcing him to break off. But I felt it, sir. I felt the P-47 wallowing, sluggish, unable to respond. I felt helpless. He turned back to Webb. If I'd had altitude and speed instead of trying to climb and turn, would it have been different? Yes, the physics is certain. The execution is what we need to prove. Holbrook nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. But you'll need to convince the rest of the squadron. And sir, with respect, they'll trust me more than they'll trust you, because I've been in combat and you haven't. The words stung, but Webb couldn't argue with them. Leadership came from credibility. In combat units, credibility came from shared experience. He was asking men to abandon proven tactics for untested theory.
They needed a believer who spoke their language. Then help me convince them, Ever. You understand what I'm proposing. You felt the P-47's limitations in combat. Help me show them there's another way. Holbrook extended his hand. Webb shook it. We have one training day tomorrow, October 4th, Webb said. Then October 5th, we test this in combat, a real mission. If it works, we expand it across the entire group. And if it doesn't work? Then I'll accept the headquarters decision and we transition to Mustangs. But at least we'll have tried. Holbrook checked his watch. I should get some sleep. 05:30 briefing tomorrow. Ever, Webb said as the captain turned to leave. Thank you for trusting me enough to try. Holbrook paused. I'm not doing this for you, sir. I'm doing it for Clarkson and Mitchell and Davies. If there's a better way to fight, a way that keeps more of us alive, I want to find it. He walked out into the night.
Webb and Garland stood in silence for a moment. That went better than expected, Garland said. He's still skeptical. They all will be. But at least he's willing to try. Colonel, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you care so much? About the P-47, about these tactics, about proving headquarters wrong? You could just accept the transition to Mustangs. Easier career path. Webb was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft. 2 years ago, my son died. Tommy. He was 9 years old. Leukemia. I was working at Republic, testing the P-47 prototype. I spent more time in the cockpit than with him during his last months. Told myself I was doing important work. War was coming. My country needed these aircraft. He paused. Tommy died while I was on a test flight. I didn't get to say goodbye. My wife died 6 months later. Broken heart. Garland said nothing, just listened. I came to England to escape that guilt, to do something meaningful with what time I have left. And now I'm watching young men, boys really, dying because they're using tactics that don't match their equipment. I can't bring Tommy back, but maybe I can keep some other father from losing his son because we were too stubborn to admit our tactics were wrong. Webb looked at the P-47 again. This aircraft isn't a failure, Nate. We've been failing it, using it wrong, and if we don't fix that, hundreds more will die needlessly. Garland nodded slowly. Then we'd better get it right, sir, because my Billy is on a B-17. And if these tactics can protect him better, I want them working yesterday. We'll do our best, Nate, starting tomorrow. Webb walked back across the flight line toward the officers' quarters. The telegram still sat on his desk in the operations room. 30 days. The countdown had begun. Behind him, in Hangar 3, Garland and his crew worked through the night, checking spark plugs, testing guns, ensuring every system was flawless. Tomorrow would bring training. The day after, combat testing. The P-47 Thunderbolt would fight a new kind of fight, or die trying. October 4th, 1943, 05:30 hours. The dawn broke cold over RAF Halesworth. Colonel Marcus Webb stood on the flight line, watching 52 P-47 Thunderbolts warm up their engines. Today wasn't a combat mission. Today was training, drilling the new doctrine until it became instinct. Captain Everett Holbrook gathered the pilots near Hangar 3. Young faces, nervous energy. They'd heard rumors about new tactics, but details had been kept quiet until now. Gentlemen, Holbrook began, his Tennessee drawl carrying across the tarmac. Today, we learn a different way to fight. Colonel Webb will explain. Webb stepped forward. He'd never been comfortable with speeches, preferred numbers and charts to inspiration. But these men needed to understand not just what they'd be doing, but why. The P-47 weighs 14,500 pounds. ABF-109G weighs 6,000. In a turning fight, lighter wins. That's not opinion, that's physics. At 15,000 feet, the Messerschmitt completes a full circle in 18 seconds. We take 24. He let that sink in. That 6-second difference is why we're losing pilots, why Clarkson and Mitchell and Davis are dead, because they fought a battle they couldn't win. Lieutenant Morrison raised his hand. "Sir, if we can't turn fight, what can we do?" Webb walked to a blackboard, drew altitude profiles. "We can dive. At 30,000 feet, this aircraft can reach 550 miles per hour in a controlled dive. The BF-109 starts coming apart at 490, the FW-190 at 520. We're structurally stronger. We can go where they can't follow." He drew the attack profile. "Here's what we'll practice today. Maintain altitude above a simulated enemy. When he commits to an attack vector, roll into a 45-degree dive, full throttle, build speed to 450 or more, track target for 3 to 4 seconds, fire 100 to 150 rounds, continue diving through his formation, use excess speed to zoom climb back to altitude, never turn, never slow down, reset and repeat." Captain Reynolds spoke up. "Sir, that sounds like we're running away." "It sounds like we're refusing to fight on enemy terms," Holbrook interjected. "I almost died over Bremen because I tried to turn with a 109. 6 seconds. That's how long it took to go from hunter to prey. This doctrine prevents that from ever happening." The training began. Webb positioned himself at altitude in his own P-47, playing the role of German fighter, climbing toward a simulated bomber formation. Holbrook led the first flight in the attack. Webb watched through his canopy as Holbrook's element rolled into their dive. 4 P-47s, nose down, building speed. The big fighters accelerated like falling anvils. 300 miles per hour, 350, 400. They screamed past Webb's altitude, so fast he barely registered their passage. If this had been real combat, if they'd been firing, he would have been dead before he could react. The P-47s continued their dive to lower altitude, then converted speed into a climbing arc that brought them back to starting position. Total time, 90 seconds. Holbrook's voice on radio. "Colonel, that felt unstoppable. The speed was incredible." "That's the advantage, Captain. Speed equals survival. Now take your flight through again. This time, I'll try to evade. Let's see if you can still track me." The drills continued all morning. Different attack angles, different entry speeds. Webb maneuvered, trying to throw off their tracking. But at 450 miles per hour, the P-47s had so much energy that his evasions barely mattered. They adjusted, fired their practice runs, and were gone before he could counter. By noon, every pilot in the group had executed at least 3 perfect boom and zoom attacks. The skepticism from this morning had transformed into something else. Confidence. Lieutenant Jackson, one of the youngest replacements, approached Webb after landing. "Sir, I've never felt that much control in combat. Usually it's chaos, reacting, trying to survive. But this, we dictate the terms. We choose when to engage. It's like having a superpower." Webb nodded. "That's exactly right, Lieutenant. Energy fighting is about control. The enemy can't hurt you if they can't catch you, and they can't catch you if you're always faster." That afternoon, Webb called a final briefing. "Tomorrow, October 5th, we have a combat mission. Escort to Frankfurt. Intelligence expects heavy German fighter presence. We'll execute this doctrine for real. Captain Holbrook will lead the first attack element. If it works as well in combat as it did today in training, we expand it to the entire group." He paused. "I know you're nervous. This is new, untested in real combat. But remember the numbers, remember the physics, trust your training, and trust each other." The pilots dispersed to their quarters. Webb remained in the briefing room, staring at the map of tomorrow's route. Lieutenant Iris Caldwell, the intelligence officer, approached with updated enemy strength estimates. "Colonel, I'm tracking increased Luftwaffe activity in the Frankfurt region. Estimate 40 to 60 fighters available for interception." "Good. We'll need targets." Caldwell smiled slightly. 26 years old, sharp analytical mind, always 3 steps ahead in her thinking. "Sir, the Luftwaffe won't be expecting this. Every engagement they've had with P-47s has followed the same pattern. They're trained to exploit our weaknesses in turning fights. When we don't turn, when we hit them from above at impossible speeds, they won't know how to respond." "Let's hope you're right, Lieutenant. The numbers support it, sir. I've analyzed every combat report from the last 3 months. German tactics rely on luring American fighters into turning contests. Remove that option, and their entire playbook becomes obsolete." Webb studied her analysis. Caldwell had documented patterns that most intelligence officers missed: attack altitudes, closure rates, evasion maneuvers. She understood aerial combat as a mathematical problem, which is probably why Webb trusted her assessments more than most. "Make sure this analysis gets to all flight leaders. I want them to know what to expect." "Yes, sir." October 5th, 1943, 0530 hours. Mission briefing. 52 pilots filled the wooden chairs. The atmosphere was different from previous missions. Less joking, more focus. They knew today would determine the future of the P-47 program.
Webb stood at the front. "Gentlemen, today's mission is maximum effort. 150 B-17S striking industrial targets in Frankfurt. We provide escort from the Dutch coast to the initial point. Expected enemy resistance is heavy. 40-plus fighters will attempt interception." He pointed to the map. "Our flight profile differs from previous missions. The bomber stream will cruise at 22,000 feet. We will maintain position at 30,000 feet, 8,000 feet above the formation we're protecting." He continued. "When German fighters appear, we do not engage immediately. We wait until they commit to their attack on the bombers. Then we dive. 45 degrees, full throttle. We hit them at maximum speed, fire once, continue through. Zoom climb back to altitude, repeat." Morrison asked, "Sir, what if they see us and scatter before we can engage?" "Then we've accomplished our mission. Protecting bombers doesn't require killing Germans. It requires preventing them from killing our bombers. If they run, the bombers are safe. That's a win." Holbrook stood. "I'll be flying Colonel Webb's wing today. We'll demonstrate the doctrine. Watch what we do and replicate it. Trust your training, trust the physics, and for God's sake, don't turn with them." The mission launched at 700 hours. 52 P-47s climbing into the morning sky, joining up with the massive bomber stream over the English Channel. Webb leveled at 30,000 feet. Below, the B-17s droned in tight formation, their contrails marking clear lines against the clouds. Beautiful aircraft, vulnerable aircraft, flying deeper into Germany than bombers had gone before. His job was to make sure they came home. 8:15, crossing the Dutch coast. Webb scanned the horizon. Nothing yet. 8:33. Caldwell's voice on radio patched through from operations. "Keystone leader, big friend. Radar contact. Large formation assembling ahead. Estimate 40 plus bandits. Angels 20, climbing." "Keystone leader copies." Webb searched the sky. There, 2 o'clock high. Black specks against white clouds. BF-109Es and FW-190Es, climbing in loose formation through 25,000 feet. "All Keystone flights, I have visual on bandits. 2 o'clock, climbing through Angels 25. Hold position, wait for them to commit." The German formation continued climbing. Webb could see them clearly now. They were being cautious, scanning for threats, aware that American fighters might be above them. Smart. The Luftwaffe was learning. 26,000 feet, 27, 28. The Germans were taking their time, not rushing into attack position. Then Webb saw the leader, a BF-109 slightly ahead of the others. The aircraft rolled into a shallow dive, beginning its attack run on the bombers below. "All Keystone flights, bandits committing. Blue and red flights, follow me in. White and yellow, stand by." Webb rolled left, pulled the nose down, 45 degrees. The altimeter unwound, 30,000, 29, 28. He pushed the throttle full forward. The R2800 engine roared, the P-47 accelerated, 300 miles per hour, 320, 350.
The airframe began to shake. Wind noise became a scream, but the controls remained solid. The P-47 was built for this. 400 miles per hour, 420, 440. Webb's target grew rapidly in the gun sight. The Bf-109 leader focused on the bombers below, unaware of death approaching from above. Range, 600 yards, 500, 400. Webb placed the gun sight reticle slightly ahead of the target, compensating for closure rate and deflection. 300 yards. He squeezed the trigger. 8 50-caliber machine guns erupted. The P-47 shuddered under the recoil. Tracers reached out in a brilliant stream, converging on the Messerschmitt. The Bf-109's canopy shattered. Pieces flew off the fuselage. Smoke poured from the engine. The German fighter rolled inverted and fell. Webb's first kill. But there was no time to celebrate. He kept the dive angle, maintaining speed. 450, 460. Other German fighters flashed past his canopy, too slow to react, unable to track something moving this fast. At 20,000 feet, Webb began his zoom climb, pulled back on the stick smoothly. The P-47's momentum carried it upward. 22,000, 25, 28. Back to starting altitude, with speed still above 200 miles per hour. Total time from dive start to recovery, 85 seconds. Holbrook's voice crackled. "Lead 2! Splash 1! This is incredible!" The radio exploded with calls. Other pilots engaging, firing, scoring kills. Morrison got 2 in one dive. Jackson nailed an FW-190 that never saw him coming. Reynolds reported a Bf-109 breaking apart under his guns, and the German formation scattered. Some dove away. Others tried to climb, but the P-47s above them simply dove again, faster than the climbing Germans could evade. In 7 minutes, the engagement was over. The Luftwaffe withdrew. Not a single German fighter reached the bombers. Webb checked his squadron. All aircraft accounted for. No damage. No losses. Keystone leader to all flights. Status check. The responses came back. Everyone was good. Fuel good. Aircraft good. Spirits excellent. Lieutenant Caldwell's voice from operations. Keystone leader. Preliminary count shows 15 bandits destroyed. Repeat, 15 confirmed. 0 friendly losses. 15-0. In one engagement, they transformed the kill ratio from pathetic to dominant. The bomber escort continued without further incident. The B-17s hit their targets and turned for home. The P-47s maintained top cover, but the Luftwaffe had learned its lesson. No further challenges came. Webb landed at 13:30 hours. As he climbed out of the cockpit, Holbrook was already there, grinning wider than Webb had ever seen. "Sir, that was the most one-sided fight I've ever been in. They couldn't touch us. We hit them like lightning and were gone before they could even turn to engage." Other pilots crowded around, talking over each other. Jackson practically shouting about his kill. Morrison describing his double. Reynolds analyzing the enemy's confused reaction. Master Sergeant Garland pushed through the crowd. "Colonel, the gun cameras. We need to review them. I want to see this." The debriefing lasted 3 hours. Gun camera footage confirmed every claim. 15 Bf-109s and FW-190s destroyed. Multiple probables. The film showed German pilots completely unable to respond to the speed of the P-47 attacks. One segment showed a Messerschmitt pilot looking up, seeing a P-47 diving on him, trying to break left. But at 450 miles per hour, the P-47 crossed 400 yards in less than 2 seconds. The Germans' evasion was too slow. The 50-caliber rounds found their mark. The Bf-109 disintegrated. Morrison spoke up during the review. "Sir, I was wrong this morning. I thought boom and zoom sounded like running. But this isn't running. This is hunting. We're predators now, not prey." Webb nodded. "That's exactly right, Captain. Energy fighting reverses the dynamic. We choose when to engage. We choose the terms. The enemy can only react." Lieutenant Jackson raised his hand. "Colonel, can we fly this way for every mission? Is this the new standard?" "Yes, Lieutenant. As of today, boom and zoom is doctrine for the 56th Fighter Group. We'll refine it, Practice it, perfect it. But this is how we fight from now on." The room erupted in approval. These men had seen the results. They believed. Over the next week, the pattern held. October 8th, mission to Bremen. 8 confirmed kills, 0 losses. October 10th, Münster. 10 kills, 1 P-47 returned with minor flak damage, no combat losses. October 12th, Osnabrück. 6 kills, 0 losses. By October 13th, the 56th Fighter Group's monthly tally stood at 39 confirmed kills against 2 non-combat losses. The kill ratio had transformed from 0.43 to 19.5 to 1. Word spread through 8th Air Force headquarters. Something had changed with the P-47 units. The Thunderbolt, previously considered a liability, was suddenly producing results that exceeded every other fighter type in theater. Brigadier General Franklin Hayes, 8th Air Force Operations, called Webb personally. 55 years old, veteran of the First World War, Hayes had been skeptical of the P-47 from the beginning. But numbers didn't lie. "Marcus, whatever you're doing with the 56th, it's working. I'm getting reports that German pilots are refusing to engage P-47 formations. They're calling you the diving devils in intercepted communications. The tactics are simple, sir. We just stopped trying to make the P-47 do what it can't and started exploiting what it can." "Well, keep doing it. I'm holding off on the transition to Mustangs. You've bought yourself time." "How much time, sir?" "Keep producing results like this, and the P-47 program is safe." "But Marcus, tomorrow's mission is different. Tomorrow's going to test everything." "Schweinfurt." "Yes, and you know what that means." Webb knew. He'd been studying the maps, running the calculations. Schweinfurt was 400 miles deep into Germany. The P-47's combat radius was 230 miles. They could only escort halfway. "Sir, we'll do what we can. Protect them as far as possible." "That's all I'm asking. Good luck, Marcus." The call ended. Webb sat in his office staring at the map. The red line to Schweinfurt stretched impossibly deep. Mathematics didn't care about bravery or determination. Fuel was fuel. Distance was distance. Tomorrow, October 14th, would prove whether tactical brilliance could overcome strategic limitations, or whether physics would win in the end. October 13th, 1943, 1800 hours. The briefing room was packed beyond capacity. Every pilot from the 56th Fighter Group, plus observers from the 78th Fighter Group who'd come to learn the new tactics. Lieutenant Iris Caldwell stood at the front, pointer in hand, expression grave. "Gentlemen, tomorrow's mission is Schweinfurt, ball-bearing factories. This will be the deepest penetration into Germany that 8th Air Force has attempted. 300 B-17. Maximum effort." She tapped the map. The red line stretched from England, across the Dutch coast, through German airspace, deep into the heart of the Reich. 400 miles. Expected opposition is extreme. Intelligence estimates 300 to 400 German fighters will be committed to defending this target. Every available Luftwaffe unit in the region. The room went silent. 300 German fighters. Captain Everett Holbrook raised his hand. "What's our escort plan?" Caldwell's jaw tightened slightly. 60 P-47s from the 56th and 78th Fighter Groups will provide escort as far as fuel permits. However, there's a problem. She moved her pointer along the route. Schweinfurt is 400 miles from the English coast. The P-47's combat radius at 30,000 feet is 230 miles. We can escort the bombers approximately to here. She tapped a point halfway to the target. Then fuel considerations require immediate return to base. The room erupted. Lieutenant Morrison stood. "Lieutenant, you're saying we're sending 300 bombers into the most heavily defended target in Germany, and they'll fly the last 200 miles without any fighter escort?" "That's correct." "What about P-51s? They have longer range." P-51B Mustangs are still in testing. None are combat ready for this mission. The P-47 is the only escort fighter we have. Holbrook looked at Colonel Webb. "Sir, this is a numbers problem. If we can only go halfway, the Luftwaffe will wait us out. then massacre the bombers after we leave. Webb stood. He'd spent the last 2 days running calculations, trying to find a solution that didn't exist. Captain Holbrook is correct. This mission exposes the fundamental limitation of our current capability. We can win every engagement we enter, but we cannot stay long enough to provide complete protection. He moved to the map, traced the route with his finger.
We'll escort from the Dutch coast to approximately this point, just past the German border. We'll have perhaps 30 to 40 minutes of combat time at that distance before fuel requires us to return. During that window, we'll engage any Luftwaffe forces we encounter using boom and zoom doctrine. But after we turn back, the bombers continue alone for another 90 minutes inbound, time over target, and 90 minutes outbound until they reach the range where we could potentially meet them again. Lieutenant Jackson spoke up, voice uncertain. "Sir, is there any way to extend our range? Extra fuel tanks, anything?" Webb had considered this, had spent hours researching it. External drop tanks are theoretically possible. We could carry additional fuel under the wings, drop the empty tanks when entering combat. But developing, testing and fielding drop tanks would take months. Engineering estimates January 1944 at the earliest. We don't have months.
Tomorrow we have the aircraft we have, with the fuel we have.
The room fell into heavy silence. Holbrook stood. Then we do what we can. We escort as far as possible, we kill every German fighter we can reach, and we give the bombers the best chance we can. Webb nodded. That's the mission. I won't lie, this will be costly, for the bomber crews especially. But Schweinfurt must be hit. German ball-bearing production is critical to their war effort. If we can destroy those factories, it impacts everything from aircraft to tanks to trucks. He paused. I'll be flying tomorrow, leading the 56th Fighter Group formation. Surprise rippled through the room. Webb rarely flew combat. As group commander, his place was in operations. If I'm asking 300 bomber crews to fly into maximum danger, the least I can do is escort them as far as possible. Captain Holbrook will fly as my wingman. Squadron leaders, finalize your flight assignments. We take off at 0630.
Dismissed. The pilots filed out, subdued. The euphoria of the previous week's victories had evaporated. After the room cleared, Caldwell approached Webb. "Sir, you don't have to fly this mission. I have a responsibility to lead. That means sharing the risk. The Luftwaffe isn't stupid. They've seen our tactics now. They'll adapt." "I know. That's why I'm going. To see how they respond. To understand what we'll face going forward." October 14th, 1943. 6:15 hours. Dawn breaking cold and grey. Webb strapped into his P-47, the familiar ritual. Parachute harness, seat belts, radio connection, oxygen mask. The cockpit smelled of oil and cordite from previous missions. Around him, 59 other P-47s started engines. The combined roar of 60 R-2800s was physically overwhelming. 120,000 horsepower. Holbrook's voice in Webb's headset. "Keystone Leader 2. Ready when you are, sir." "Roger 2. Stand by for taxi."
By 6:30, all 60 aircraft were airborne, climbing in formation toward the rendezvous. Webb leveled at 30,000 feet. Below, scattered clouds. Above, empty sky turning pale blue as the sun climbed. At 7:30, the bomber stream appeared. 300 B-17 flying fortresses in tight combat boxes. Each bomber carried 10 men. 3,000 souls heading toward the most dangerous target in Europe. Webb's job was to protect them for 90 minutes. After that, they were alone. 8:15, crossing the Dutch coast. 8:33, bandits 2 o'clock high, climbing, count 40 plus. Webb looked right and saw them. BF-109S and FW-190S climbing through 25,000 feet, positioning for attacks. But they were climbing slowly, cautiously, and Webb saw why. A second formation at 29,000 feet, almost level with the P-47s. The Luftwaffe had positioned a high cover element
to counter the American altitude advantage. Clever. They'd adapted. Keystone flights, we have bandits at our altitude. Blue and red flights engage high threat. White and yellow dive on lower formation when I engage. Green, maintain top cover. Range closed. 1,000 yards. 800. 600. Webb selected his target. A Bf-109 slightly ahead. He pushed throttle forward, building speed in level flight. The Germans saw him, turned hard left. Classic defensive break. But Webb didn't turn. He held course, let the German turn across his nose, led the target, compensated for deflection. 400 yards. Webb squeezed the trigger. 850 calibers erupted. Tracers converged. The Bf-109 flew into the stream. Hits sparkled along the fuselage. The canopy shattered. The Messerschmitt rolled inverted, trailing smoke, and fell. Webb's first kill confirmed. 2 more 109s coming head-on, guns flashing. Webb pulled hard right, G-forces pressing him down. Tracers passed where he'd been. Holbrook's voice strained. Lead 2.
Braking left. I've got 3 on me.
Webb reversed, looking for his wingman. Saw Holbrook's P-47 in a diving turn. 3 Bf-109s pursuing, cutting inside his turn radius. 2. Level out and accelerate. Don't turn with them. Roger, trying. Holbrook straightened, pushed throttle forward. The P-47 began pulling away in level flight. Better power to weight at high speed. Webb dove on the trailing 109, built speed to 400. The Messerschmitt grew in his gun sight. He fired. The 109's tail section disintegrated, but more German fighters joined. The sky filled with aircraft, twisting, diving, climbing. This wasn't the clean engagements of the previous week. This was chaos. Below, the lower German formation dove on the bombers. White and yellow flights engaged them. P-47s screaming down. Flashes, aircraft falling. But there were so many German fighters. Morrison's voice stressed. Keystone 6, fuel critical. I need to RTB. Webb checked his own gauge. 140 gallons remaining. 20 minutes, maybe less. More calls. Jackson reporting a kill. Reynolds calling out bandits diving on bombers. The radio was pandemonium. 115 gallons. They'd been fighting for 25 minutes, burning fuel at combat power. The math was absolute. Keystone leader to all flights. Check fuel status, report. The responses came back. Everyone was low, some critically so. Webb calculated. Current fuel, 110 gallons. Distance to base, 260 miles. Consumption at cruise, 100 gallons per hour minimum. Required fuel, approximately 130 gallons. They were already 20 gallons short. If they left immediately, some wouldn't make it home. They'd ditch in the channel. If they stayed 5 more minutes, none would make it. Below, the bombers were under attack. He could see B-17s breaking formation, smoke trailing. One fell, wings torn away. Holbrook pulled alongside.
Sir, we're critically low. We need to call it.
Webb knew. The physics didn't care about duty or courage or the men dying below. He keyed the radio, his voice hollow. All Keystone flights disengage. Return to base immediately. Repeat, RTB now. Holbrook looked at him through the canopy. Even with masks obscuring faces, Webb could see the anguish. Sir, the bombers. I know. RTB. That's an order. 60 P-47s turned west. Below them, 291 B-17 continued east. Alone. The bomber frequency was still active. Crews calling for help. Need fighters. Where's our escort? We're getting slaughtered. Webb switched to bomber channel, keyed his mic. Boxcar leader, this is Keystone leader. Fuel critical. We have to leave you. Good luck. A long pause, then a tired voice. The bomber leader. Roger, Keystone. Thanks for what you did. See you on the other side. The flight home was silent. Webb watched his fuel gauge drop. 100, 90, 80.
70 gallons crossing the Dutch coast. Still 100 miles from base. At 50 gallons, Morrison called. Keystone 6, engine running rough, going to ditch. Webb watched Morrison's P-47 descend toward the channel. Textbook ditching.
The pilot climbed onto the wing, pulled his life raft. Air-sea rescue would get him. Probably. Webb's gauge read 35 gallons as England appeared. RAF. Halesworth was 15 miles inland. He'd make it. Barely. He landed at 10:12. The engine quit during taxi, fuel completely exhausted. 57 P-47s returned, 3 diverted to closer fields, all pilots safe. A perfect mission by their standards. Somewhere over Germany, 291 B-17s fought alone. Webb walked to operations. Caldwell was there, tracking radio intercepts. Her face was ashen. "Colonel, we're receiving reports. Heavy attacks, multiple aircraft down." "How many?" "At least 20 confirmed. Reports still coming." 20 bombers. 200 men.
The numbers kept climbing. 30, 40, 50. By the time surviving bombers reached England that evening, the count was final. 60 B-17s shot down. 650 aircrew killed or captured. The worst single-day loss in 8th Air Force history. Webb sat in his office as darkness fell. The telegram was still on his desk. 21 days remaining. The 56th had done everything right. Perfect tactics. They'd driven off the first attacks, scored multiple kills, protected the bombers as long as physically possible. It hadn't been enough. Footsteps in the doorway. Master Sergeant Garland stood there. His eyes were red. His hands trembled. "Sir, I need to tell you something." Webb felt dread settle in his stomach. "What is it, Nate?" "My son, Billy. Waist gunner, 91st Bomb Group. They flew today." Garland's voice cracked. "Shot down over Schweinfurt. 3 parachutes seen. Billy wasn't one of them." The older man's face crumpled. A father who'd just lost his only child.
Webb stood, crossed the room, gripped Garland's shoulder. There were no words. Nothing would change what happened. They stood together in darkness. Finally, Garland spoke, voice rough but controlled. "Colonel, this isn't your fault. You did everything possible. Billy knew the risks." "That doesn't make it acceptable." "No, but it makes it war." Garland wiped his eyes. "Sir, we need to fix this. Find a way to go farther. I don't want other fathers getting the telegram I got. I don't want Billy's death to be meaningless." Webb looked at him. "I don't know how. The physics says we can't carry enough fuel." "Then we change the physics." "That's not how it works." "Then we change the aircraft." Garland's jaw set. "External tanks. You said they'd take months. What if we had weeks? What if we worked around the clock?" Webb shook his head. "Engineering, testing, production. Even emergency schedule, we're talking January." "Billy died today, sir."
"How many more die while we wait for January?"
The question hung. Webb returned to his desk, pulled engineering manuals, external fuel tank specifications. He dismissed these as impossible on current timeline, but what if impossible just meant extremely difficult? He began calculating. Fuel capacity required, tank size, attachment points, weight distribution, structural stress. A P-47 carrying 2 external tanks would weigh 18,000 pounds at takeoff, 4,000 over normal. Takeoff roll would be enormous, climb rate terrible. If attacked during climb, the overweight fighters would be slaughtered, but if they burned external fuel first, then dropped empty tanks before combat, they'd be normal weight when fighting began, and they'd have fuel to reach Berlin if necessary. Theoretically possible. Webb looked at Garland. "If we do this, I need your expertise. You know P-47 systems better than anyone. You'd lead installation and testing." "Yes, sir, whatever it takes."
"It might fail. We might waste weeks and accomplish nothing."
"Billy's dead, sir. I've already failed the most important thing. At least let me try to save other sons." Webb nodded. "Tomorrow we start. I'll contact Engineering Division, get prototypes. We'll test them here, modify if necessary, install ourselves if headquarters won't prioritize it." He stood, walked to the window. Outside, P-47S sat silent. Massive, powerful, deadly. Not quite good enough. Not yet. The next morning, Webb called General Hayes.
Sir, I need emergency authorization. External drop tanks for the P-47. I want prototypes, engineering support, and priority manufacturing. Hayes was quiet. Marcus, engineering said January at earliest. January means 3 more months of missions like yesterday. 3 more months of 60 bombers lost per deep strike. That's 1,800 aircraft. 18,000 men. I understand the math, Marcus, but what you're asking, I'm asking for a chance to make the P-47 work the way it should have from the beginning. Give me 8 weeks. If we can't make drop tanks work by December 15th, I'll personally recommend the P-51 transition. Hayes sighed. You have 6 weeks, Marcus, not 8. If drop tanks aren't combat ready by December 1st, we're done. I'll send you the prototypes and 2 engineers. The rest is on you. Thank you, sir. The prototypes arrived October 18th. 2 108-gallon cylindrical tanks designed to attach under the wings. Plus, Lieutenant Commander Robert Ashford and civilian engineer Patricia Thornton from Republic Aviation. Garland assembled his best mechanics. They worked 18-hour days. First problem: attachment pylons didn't fit P-47 wing hardpoints. Required custom fabrication. Second problem: tanks threw off weight distribution. Aircraft wanted to yaw on takeoff. Third problem: release mechanism jammed under G-forces.
Holbrook volunteered as test pilot. November 3rd. First flight with loaded drop tanks. Takeoff roll, 4,200 feet. Barely cleared the trees. Climb rate, 1,400 feet per minute, half normal. If German fighters hit us during this climb, Holbrook reported, we're dead. We're too heavy, too slow. That's why we burn the external fuel first, Webb explained. Climb over England where it's safe. Burn both tanks dry during cruise. Drop them over the Dutch coast before entering hostile airspace. Enter combat at normal weight. November 12th, release test. Holbrook climbed to 20,000 feet, executed high G turn, hit the release. Both tanks fell clean. The P-47 immediately handled normally. It works! Holbrook's voice crackled with excitement. Handling is perfect once tanks are gone. November 20th, full mission profile test. Holbrook took off with full internal fuel plus 2 full drop tanks. Total, 521 gallons. 18,000 pounds gross weight.
He flew a simulated combat mission, cruise to German border, drop tanks, simulated combat, return to base. He landed with 80 gallons remaining, enough reserve for 15 minutes of combat. Range, 475 miles, far enough to reach Berlin. Colonel, Holbrook said after landing, this changes everything. With drop tanks we can escort bombers anywhere in Germany. The Luftwaffe can't hide from us anymore. Webb allowed himself a smile. Nate, how fast can your crews install pylons and wire releases on 60 aircraft? Garland checked his notes. Working around the clock? 12 days for the whole group. You have 10 days. We need to be combat ready by December 1st. December 1st, 1943. General Hayes flew to Halesworth personally to observe final tests. Holbrook led a 12-ship formation on a long-range navigation exercise with drop tanks. They flew to a point 420 miles from base, dropped tanks, executed simulated combat, returned. All 12 landed with adequate fuel reserves. Hayes watched the aircraft taxi in, turned to Webb. I'll authorize drop tanks for all P-47 groups. How soon can you train other squadrons? 2 weeks for basic proficiency. We'll send instructor pilots. Do it. And Marcus, I'm cancelling the Mustang transition. For now, the P-47 stays. Webb felt relief wash over him. The 30-day deadline was long past, but the work had continued, and now it had paid off. That evening, Webb found Garland in the maintenance hangar, supervising final installations. Nate, we did it! Drop tanks are approved. The program is saved. Garland nodded slowly. Billy would have liked that, sir. Knowing his death led to something that might save others. He'd be proud of you, Nate. You turned grief into purpose. Had a good teacher, sir. You did the same after your son.
They stood in silence. Two fathers who'd lost children, now working to save other people's children. February 20th, 1944. The first deep strike mission with drop tanks. 94 P-47s from 4 fighter groups, all equipped with external tanks. Target: Braunschweig, 420 miles into Germany. Webb led the 56th Fighter Group. Holbrook flew as his deputy. The mission launched at 7:15. The P-47s climbed slowly, burdened by extra fuel. But they climbed over England, where it was safe. At 8:34, over the Dutch coast, Webb gave the order. All units, drop tanks, execute. 188 external tanks fell into the North Sea. The P-47s immediately became nimble, deadly. They continued into Germany. The Luftwaffe scrambled over 200 fighters to intercept. But when German formations climbed to attack the bombers, 94 P-47s dove on them from above. The boom and zoom doctrine, perfected over 4 months, executed with precision. The battle lasted 38 minutes. 47 German fighters destroyed, 3 P-47s lost. But the critical difference, the P-47s stayed with the bombers all the way to target, all the way back, no gaps, no vulnerable periods. Not a single bomber was lost to fighter attack. At 11:15, as they crossed back toward the coast, disaster struck. Holbrook's voice strained. "Lead 2, I'm hit, engine smoking, losing power." Webb looked right, saw smoke trailing from Holbrook's P-47. An FW-190 had gotten a lucky shot during the chaos. "2, can you maintain altitude?" "Negative, I'm descending, going to have to bail." An FW-190 dove on Holbrook from above, lining up for the kill shot. Webb didn't think. He reversed hard, dove on the German fighter. Maximum speed. His airspeed indicator climbed past 500. He fired. The FW-190 exploded. But a second FW-190 was behind Webb, unnoticed. It fired. Cannon shells walked across Webb's left wing. The aileron tore away. Control became sluggish. "Lead, you're hit," Holbrook called. Webb tried to compensate. The P-47 responded, but poorly. His altitude was bleeding off. 16,000 feet. 15. 14. He ran calculations. Damaged glide ratio, approximately 8:1. Current altitude, 14,000 feet. Maximum glide, 21 miles. Distance to base, 385 miles. Shortfall, 364 miles. Physics was absolute. "Ever, take the group home." "Sir, no." "You're in command now, Captain. Don't waste what we built." Webb checked his bailout procedure. At 8,000 feet, he pulled the canopy release. Cold air blasted into the cockpit. He rolled the crippled P-47 inverted, released his straps and fell into space. The parachute opened at 6,000 feet. Webb floated down, watching his P-47 spiral away and crash in a field below. He landed in a forest. German soldiers arrived within minutes. A Wehrmacht officer approached, spoke in accented English. "You are Colonel Marcus Webb, yes? The one who teaches the diving attacks?" "Yes." "You have changed this war, Colonel. We cannot fight what you have created." Webb was taken to a truck, then a train, then Stalag Luft 3 prisoner camp. He would spend the next 15 months there until Germany surrendered. But while Webb sat in a POW camp, his legacy flew every day. March 6, 1944. Captain Everett Holbrook, now Major and commanding the 56th Fighter Group, led P-47s to Berlin for the first time. The fighters escorted bombers all the way to the Reich capital and back. The Luftwaffe was shattered. German pilot experience evaporated. Air superiority became American. When Allied troops landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe was largely absent. Not by accident, by design. May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. May 15, 1945, Webb was released from Stalag Luft 3. He returned home to America. No wife, no son, just memories and equations. But he'd saved thousands of lives. The statistics proved it. The 56th Fighter Group finished the war with 1,006 confirmed aerial victories, highest score in the 8th Air Force. Kill ratio, 7.9 to 1. Bomber losses to fighter attack dropped 70% after drop tanks were introduced. Estimated lives saved, over 10,000 aircrew. Webb returned to Republic Aviation as chief engineer. In 1947, he and Nathaniel Garland, working together, designed the P-84 Thunderjet, America's first successful jet fighter. 1950, Korean War. Lieutenant Colonel Everett Holbrook commanded a fighter squadron, taught Webb's energy fighting doctrine to a new generation. The tactics remained effective. 1951. A military historian interviewed Webb for a book on air combat tactics. "Colonel Webb, do you consider yourself a hero?" Webb was quiet. "I did math, that's all. I calculated what the P-47 could do, then let pilots do it. The heroes are the men who flew, the men who died. I just did math." 1967. The 56th Fighter Group reunion. 400 veterans gathered, standing ovation when Webb entered. Nathaniel Garland, now 70 years old, tears streaming, approached. "You saved thousands, Marcus. Billy's death wasn't meaningless because what you built, what we built together, saved his brothers." Webb gripped the older man's hand. "We did it together, Nate. You turned your grief into life. That's the real victory." 1985. A German television crew interviewed former Luftwaffe ace Johann Steinhoff for a documentary. What about the American P-47 and Colonel Webb's tactics? Steinhoff, 73 years old, was quiet. "Webb's doctrine was brilliant. We had no answer. After February 1944, we knew the war was lost." Not because of the P-51, though that was excellent too, but because the Americans learned to use what they had. That kind of adaptation, that intelligence in warfare, is unbeatable. 1988. Webb, 82 years old, visited the Air Force Museum in Ohio. He stood before a restored P-47D Thunderbolt. A young tour guide, not knowing who Webb was, explained to visitors. "This aircraft was considered a failure at first. Too heavy, too slow to turn." Webb smiled. "Not a failure, son, just misunderstood. It was perfect for what it could do, just needed someone to see it." The guide looked at the old man curiously. "Did you fly these, sir?" "Once or twice, long time ago." Webb ran his hand along the wing. 7 decades. The metal was cold, but he remembered. The roar of the R-2800, the acceleration in a dive, the moment when theory became reality. He remembered everything. December 3rd, 1992. Colonel Marcus Webb died at home, age 86, heart failure. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Gravestone inscription: Colonel Marcus Webb, 1906 to 1992, United States Army Air Force. He changed how we fight, not with better machines, but with better thinking. At the funeral, Major General Everett Holbrook, retired, gave the eulogy. 78 years old now, voice still strong. Marcus Webb never wanted glory. He wanted to save lives. He succeeded. Every pilot flying today, every fighter doctrine in every Air Force traces back to what he proved in 1943. Energy fighting, boom and zoom, fighting to your strengths. He lost his son. He lost his wife. He spent the war in a prison camp, but he saved 10,000 lives. And he taught us that victory doesn't come from having the best weapon. Victory comes from using your weapon best. Fair winds and following seas, Colonel. The sky is yours forever. The P-47 Thunderbolt flew in combat until 1955. Over 15,000 were built. It became one of the most successful fighters of World War II. Not because it was the fastest, not because it could turn the tightest, but because one engineer, grieving his son, decided to stop fighting the wrong fight and changed warfare forever.